And welcome back to another episode of the Total Sports Live podcast. This is Jovan Alford. You already know who I'm joined by, my guy, Harrison Browns. We're not going to be talking about those Eagles, which we always love to do here on the podcast. We're not going to talk about the Sixers, which we did last week. If you missed that episode, me, Nick, Seth, breaking it all down, Doc Rivers being fired, where does the team go from there, and Daryl Morey's press conference. If you missed that episode, that's right now on Spotify, so make sure you go get that right now and listen to it. Like after you listen to this podcast, go listen to that one, right? Just do the quick 2-for-1 right there. However, we're not going to be talking about those teams. We're going to talk about another team that's in action right now in the city. And no, it's not my Philadelphia Stars. It's those Philadelphia Phillies who have started off the regular season a little rough, but they're starting to pick it up lately. Took 2 out of 3 against the Cubs, and they were able to salvage the series today as we're recording this podcast on Wednesday. We're able to salvage a 3-game set against the Diamondbacks, picking up a walk-off win in extra innings. And after this, the Phillies will open up a 10-game roadie against 3 NL East teams, which could mean very good things or it can mean very bad things for this team, depending how it goes for them. However, before we talk about what happened in today's game and look forward to this pivotal road trip that will really decide a lot of things for this team going forward, make sure you're following us on Twitter at Total Sports Live and checking out totalsportslive.com. Also, make sure you're checking out the podcast on Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcast. Make sure you go search, look it up, download, subscribe, tell a friend, share it with a friend. Do whatever you got to do to get us to click and listen. We really appreciate everybody tuning in and listen. As always, if you missed the audio version of this podcast, you can check it out on YouTube, on Harrison's YouTube page, Harrison Brown-Russo, right there on YouTube. Go hit that subscribe button as well. He got the vids up there. Go hit that subscribe button. And also go, and I know I'm going to say this again, we got a whole bunch of subscribing going on. Make sure you go subscribe to Harrison's newsletter, harrisonbrownrusso.substack.com. URL, as I just said, at harrisonbrownrusso.substack.com. Make sure you go subscribe to the newsletter. A lot of good newsletters coming out lately. MLB, draft, athletics, arena football. So pretty much just the whole. I'm trying to look for the word for it. I want to say Pandora's box. It's just a whole lot of good like sports information right there. If you like arena and baseball and NFL draft and all that good stuff, it's right there over in the newsletter. And yeah, that's about it. I think we plugged everything before we jumped into the Phillies conversation. But like I said, before we do that, as always, like I said, I'm joined by my guy Harrison, breaking it down, talking baseball, a Harrison edition of the podcast, talking baseball. Harrison, how are you doing? You wasn't on last week's show to talk about the Sixers, which I understand. The Sixers aren't a great topic to talk about, but we're going to talk about something nicer today, and that's those Philadelphia Phillies.
Well, first of all, Jovan, you're the man. Appreciate you for all the plugs. You know, you've got my stuff more locked in than I do. I feel like sometimes you got all the URLs and the ads. You know, if you ask me to do that, I might slip up on a few. I might mess up. So I appreciate you, man. Like you said, man, you guys already have it in the queue. After this episode, the Sixers episode is going to come up. Tune into that. I was listening to that right before we got on, just running that episode back. I did a great job with that one, talking about, oh man, another second round exit for those Sixers. You know, I've been locked in on the draft this year, real lasered in on the film, like my guy Jaws would say. So maybe not as many Sixers games for me this year. I let, my guys Seth and Nick, I really, let the air kind of flow on that one. Instead of 4 people being on there, man, let's let Seth and Nick, 2 of our NBA guys, 2 guys who know it in and out. Nick did a great job covering it for WIP this year, man, being down there at the games,
yes, he did.
Covering all those games, having great content online. I mean, a big salute to him and all the things he's doing. So really enjoyed that episode. Like you said, man, let that come up in the queue after this one. But yeah, those Philadelphia Phillies, 23-26 right now, a little bit below 500, coming off the World Series run. There's a lot of expectations, maybe a little bit too high of expectations with what this team really is. We got a lot to break down tonight, looking at really where they're going to go from here. We got a long ways to go, but 23-26 might not be the most appealing. And hey, they got the win today. Trey Turner with the 2-run home run to tie it, Bohm with the walk-off, but it was 5-1 at one point in that game, pretty late in the game to the Diamondbacks. It could have been a lot gloomier of a podcast today if they really lost that series to the Diamondbacks, but they got that win today. Good win. Trey Turner with the home run. Hopefully that turns his season around. So, let's talk some baseball, man.
Yeah, you're right. I guess the Phillies must have heard that we were doing a podcast today, and they didn't want to come. They didn't want us to talk about a 3-game sweep at the
Right.
hand of the Diamondbacks, who, like we said before the show, Diamondbacks are a really good team, right?
Yeah.
Even after today's loss, they're 29-21, very good team. I think a lot of people just don't think about that because of the division they playing with the Dodgers and the Padres. Even the Padres have kind of taken that step back right now, but it looks like the Diamondbacks has overtaken them in that division. So they're not a bad team. Diamondbacks are a really good team offensively. Pitching's a little outside of Zach Gallen, but they've still been able to get a number done. But like we said, the Phillies are able to somehow overcome that, right? Like you said, they were down early, 5 runs scored in the first 3 innings by the Diamondbacks. First run was scored in the first inning of the ground. Rivera grounded out the third with Ketel Marte scoring. Then Rivera came up again, doubled to center. He's probably like one of my favorite players to use on like the show with his swing. It's just a very good swing. Doubled to center. Corbin Carroll scored along with Herrera. Then in the third inning, Evan Longoria hit a 422-foot bomb, and somehow Rivera scored on that. So Rivera was all into this game the first 5 innings, and it didn't look good for Ranger Suarez after those first 3 innings, but got to give credit to Suarez. He battled back. Outside of that, gave up 5 hits, 5 runs, 1 walk, struck out 5. He really battled after the first 3 innings, and then after that, it was up to the bullpen. The bullpen had to hold it down the rest of the way. We're talking about Hoffman, who struggled with 3 walks and only a third of an inning, pitched, and then Vasquez came out, did his thing. Brogdon, solid. Junior Marte, solid, and obviously they got the Kimbrel and the extras. Did their thing, and like when the pitching, when the bullpen comes down and try and hold you down, your offense has to get going, and that's what the Phillies offense are able to do. 6 inning, they play station to station baseball. Just move guys over and get them home. And they were able to do that, getting 3 runs in that 6 inning. And then the 9th inning, Trey Turner, who has struggled immensely this season, coming off an immaculate performance in the World Baseball Classic. He was able to come through with a clutch game tying 2-run home run in the bottom of the ninth when Ruiz, I don't know what he was thinking. He just thought he was just going to get a curveball, and the curveball didn't curve. It just stayed at the top of the zone. And Trey Turner knows what to do with those, regardless he's in a slump or not. He crushed it, got out of the park, and then in the 10th inning, Phillies walk it off. Alec Bohm with a single to the right, with Dalton Guthrie scoring. Clemens the second, Schwarber the third. That's how it ends. Phillies win 6-5. They salvaged 1 game from that series. They in their 6th game, I think that was a 6-game homestand, if I'm not mistaken.
Believe so.
Yep,
Yeah.
6-game homestand, 3-3. It's not horrible, and it's not the end of the world. Just because, again, I think people outside of Philadelphia might hear Diamondbacks and Cubs. They're like, team's not that good. Both of these teams have been surprisingly very good in their respective divisions. So 3-3 to come out, especially after how the beginning of the Diamondbacks series started, to come away and get a come from behind win going into what you have a tough stretch coming up. Huge win from the Phillies. So, and before we talk about Trey Turner, Harrison, just what was your thoughts from today's game? Because like I said, first 2 games of this series didn't go well. They played really well against the Cubs over the weekend. I mean, last weekend, and then you come back and you lose 2. You had to get this third one. It didn't look good, but the Phillies do what they do best, right? They don't necessarily quit. They somehow find a way to get that victory and bring it all the way home.
Yeah, it's a nice one. They do that a lot. They're a scrappy team. They're a team that really steps up when their back's against the wall. And I mean, you look at it, if you were just looking at this Diamondback series, which game is the least probable to win? Probably the one that Zach Gallen is starting,
Yep.
their top pitcher, one of the top pitchers in the NL. That's kind of how the Phillies are. They'll step up against one of those top pitchers, a guy like Scherzer, Gallen. But if it's that 5th starter in the rotation with a high 4 ERA, they might not step up as much. They might have a slow game. So it's encouraging to see them get this one. Definitely would have been, a disappointing series to lose to the Diamondbacks and get swept by them. But, like you said, we talked about a pre-show. They really are an improved team this year, the Diamondbacks. There's a lot of teams like that in this year's MLB. Teams like the the Pirates, the Rangers, the Baltimore Orioles. The Diamondbacks are another one, really an improved team. Love the development of Corbin Carroll, one of their top prospects. Great to see him up in the big leagues making plays. But for the Phillies, definitely an encouraging win. I think with this team, there's still a long way to go. I think there's still a lot of holes in this lineup, and the bullpen in particular. You mentioned some of the guys in the bullpen today that stepped up, but those names overall, I don't know if you want to go into a postseason run with Hoffman and Velasquez and even guys like Brogdon and Bilotti. They stepped up last year, but is it who you really trust to be in your bullpen to go lock down the eighth inning late in September, late in October? It's a little bit questionable. Even Craig Kimbrell, you know what I mean? That's a great name, a guy who's been in the league for years, but is that one of those guys that you really think is going to lock down, a late game important game in the season? So that's kind of my thoughts. Definitely an encouraging win. This is a tough road trip coming up. It's a really big test for the Phillies. 10 games on the road, playing against the Braves, playing against the Mets. It's kind of a litmus test for them. It's kind of an opportunity to see where they're at on this season. Where do you compare to the Braves? Where do you compare to the Mets? How do you kind of stack up against them and what they have at this early point in the season? I think it's an important thing for the Phillies.
It's very important. Like you said, this season has been very up and down for them, and they started off the year 1-5, then it went
that Ranger series.
Yeah, Ranger series was rough, and then they slowly started to get it back together where they were 6-10. Like, all right, starting to put it together. They get back to 500. They're 15 and they're 15-14 after that Astro series where they played really well. And you're thinking, okay, like, all right, this team's starting to figure it out, starting to turn around. Bryce Harper isn't back at this time yet, but they're about to get him back in that next series, and then they go on this slide to start May, and then they start to pick it back up with a 5-game winning streak, and then it goes to another. Then it goes to a 5-game losing streak that carried over into game 1 of the Cubs series. But then they obviously, like I said, they take the series, but then they go back on 2 lose here, but they get back in the W, and they get back into the win column. And one of those players that helped them get back into the win column, we mentioned it earlier, was Trey Turner, who had probably one of the most incredible performances in the World Baseball Classic in general, but most likely for Team USA, probably was one of the best players on the field for him and at the plate. A lot of people, I think, and you might agree, probably expected him to carry that momentum over, because you're like, oh man, he's hitting everything. He's hitting grand slams, he's hitting home runs. Like, who is this power hitter Trey Turner? I mean, I was even seeing people going out on a whim saying this guy gonna hit 40 home runs and still 40 bases. I was like, all right, slow down now. Slow down. I know the World Baseball Classic is the best of the best across the field, but come on now, 40 home runs for a guy that hasn't hit 40 home runs in his career. Like, let's slow down here. And he hasn't been able to really replicate that start, and he struggling very early on with the Phillies. But maybe this home run that he hits in the ninth kind of breaks him out of his funk and starts to get him back to the Trey Turner that we know, who is a career 299 hitter. So Harrison, are you concerned about just how he started his start with his Phillies career, or do you think, like I said, we'll see the Turner who we've seen over multiple years, that's a 299 hitter that can, steal 20 bases, hit 20 home runs, hit for average, and really just cause a lot of damage on the base pads?
Man, I was one of those 40 for 40 guys this year. I was like, it's bigger bases. He's getting 40 steals easy. He's got the power now. World Baseball Classic, all the buzz around the World Baseball Classic this year, all the hype that Trey Turner had. It's easy to get excited. And then you look at the Phillies lineup. They went to the World Series last year. It's this strong lineup. You're adding Trey Turner at it. Everything's going to go right. It's early in the year. It's May, but it hasn't went how they would have planned so far. It's a 10-year deal, $300 million deal. The expectations that come with that are already going to be high. Then you're coming off, a historic World Baseball Classic performance. And like I mentioned, the buzz in this year's World Baseball Classic felt bigger than other years. It felt like there was a lot of eyes on every game. It felt like Trey Turner, his big performances were really seen by a lot of people. So the expectation was that's going to carry right over. This lineup is going to be clicking. I think he's been a little over aggressive this year. I think that's something that's pretty well documented. Even today on the game tying home run, that's first pitch swinging. Obviously, Ruiz hung a curveball. Turner, real pretty, smooth, fluid swing, all one motion. Really love his swing. Even back in those World Baseball Classic. You know what I mean? And even his Nationals
Mm-hmm.
days and Dodgers days, like it's well documented. You mentioned it, 299 hitter, really well polished hitter, well rounded hitter, a guy who can do a lot of different things, can lead off in the lineup, can hit in different spots in your lineup. Like it's a really appealing pickup. That's why the Phillies went out 10 years, $300 million. The hype around the move. So I think today, that's a nice way to go out, tie a game at home, an important game. You don't want to get swept by the Diamondbacks. Trey Turner, go out there with a clutch hit, really give you some momentum and confidence. We know, I mean, maybe more than any sport, baseball is a game of confidence. It's a game of momentum. It's a game of streaks. You kind of mentioned it with
Yep.
the Phillies in general. They're a streaky team, man. They're going to go out
Mm-hmm.
and win 5 games and then lose 6. And it's kind of what helped them last year in the playoffs. Honestly, they caught fire. They caught one of their streaks. They caught one of those runs where they went out and beat the Cardinals, and then they beat the Braves, and then they beat the Padres. They were rolling. I mean, they didn't lose many games during that time. They were, I think, at one point like 7-0, or I mean, they were really rolling in the playoffs. So I think that's kind of this Phillies team. That's kind of a blessing and a curse. You're going to get stretches, and hey, maybe it's next month in June. Maybe Kyle Schwarber's month of June. The past 2 years, especially that 2021 season, I think he had close to 20 home runs in the month of June. Maybe they
Mm-hmm.
catch one of their streaks in June. Maybe they win 15, 20 games in June. It's not out the picture. And this podcast a month from now, we could be having a totally different conversation. But I think at the same time, don't be surprised if they wind up losing 7, 8 games at some point in this season. Like, they're a
Yep.
very streaky team. I think that's kind of going to be this Philadelphia Phillies team with the way they're constructed.
Yeah, no, 100%. And I think, like you said, you hit it spot on, right? Like, this team is an up and down team, and even some of the players, right? They're just up and down. They go on streaks, and for a guy like Trey Turner, right, you hope that this home run, helps unlock some things for him, because you look at his splits at home, he's only hitting 204 with 2 home runs, 5 RBIs, 29 strikeouts, but on the road, he's hitting 292, 348, 434. That's what he's slashing. So if you're a Phillies fan, you're like, okay, he just hit a home run, and now they're about to go on a 10-game road trip. Maybe this is where it starts to click, because if we know Bryson Stott is hitting well at the top of the lineup, if you get Trey Turner hitting it well at the top of the order, with him getting on base, getting a single and still in the base to get the second, or getting a double to really set up your big bats to just say, I don't need you to hit a home run. I just need you to slap the ball in the outfield, and I'll take it the rest of the way. This could really be a good setup for a Phillies team who, let's say it, right? This team has been dealt a lot of injuries, throughout the what? This is game they've won how many games so
Tomorrow's
far?
50. Tomorrow's the 50th
Yeah,
game of the
so they're
year.
going 50th game of the year, and for this team has had a lot of injuries. I mean, the rotation, have dealt with a whole bunch of guys being in and out. I mean, to the point where they were having position players playing pitcher just because games were getting out of hand early. The starting lineups having guys injured. Derek Hall injured. Harper, him
Right.
coming back, and you trying to figure out the batting order. Schwarber was the leadoff guy. Now he's not hitting
Hoskins.
leadoff anymore. Yeah,
Let's
no
go all the way
Reese.
back. Right.
Yeah, no Reese. And you're trying to figure out, all right, what do you do with Alec Bohm? Do you put him at first? What about Sosa? Or are they going to play Sosa a little bit too much where he gets, worn down? So there's a lot of moving pieces and shifting pieces on this team. And maybe this road trip will kind of give them that cohesion. And maybe, like I said, maybe this win kind of lifts them up and say, all right, we were able to come back. We probably shouldn't put ourselves in that position, but we were able to come back. We're going on the road with a winning note. Let's see what we can kind of do. And then, like I said, if Trey Turner is doing his job at the top of the lineup with Bryson Stott, just makes this offense just more deadly, because you have Castellanos, Harper, Schwarber, Realmuto. Boom. Literally coming right up after him. That's not a bad 5 hitters coming up after 1 or 2 gets on base.
The lineup on paper is outstanding, and that's what the hype was in February, and late in the winter and early into spring training. That was kind of the excitement. And ideally, Trey Turner and Bryson Stott, you kind of mentioned him hitting the ball well. That's supposed to be your middle infield for the next 8, 9 years. Like, that's supposed
Yep.
to be your middle infield. That's your second base and shortstop duo. So a lot to be excited about there. I think that's something they can build on. I think, like you mentioned, something that I really like that you mentioned. try to build some cohesiveness with this road trip. I think one of the things we saw with the Phillies last year when they hit their streak in the playoffs and even late in the season, felt like that team was having a lot of fun playing baseball. Felt like that team really liked each other and was tight. Not that this year's team doesn't. Maybe there's just a little bit more pressure on this year's team. We're early in the year. They're the defending National League champions. There's a lot of expectations. This is a better team on paper than what they had last year with the addition of Trey Turner, with them kind of shoring some things up in the rotation, adding Taijuan Walker, even the bullpen. They added some pieces, guys like Soto, Craig Kimbrel. So, there might be a little bit more pressure going out and winning some games on the road against your division rivals, against the team that, in September you're going to be competing with to win either the NL East or even the wild card. That's three really good teams we're talking about right here with the Braves and the Mets. Like, these teams will be around when we're talking about the playoffs. There could be a playoff series against one of these teams. They beat the Braves in the playoffs last year. So you kind of get what I'm getting at here. Like, this could be a big weekend for them just in terms of really putting this team together, putting this 2023 group as a whole together, getting some of that cohesiveness. I think that's a really good point.
Yeah, most definitely. Before we talk about the 10-game stretch and what they have coming up going forward, we're going to talk about the top of the order. And we mentioned them, Stott, but we also got to talk about Brandon Marsh, the young kids, the daycare. You got to include Alec Bohm, but specifically these two guys who, showed glimpses and flashes last season, had moments in the postseason, and have really catapulted themselves to be playing great baseball this season for the Phillies at different parts of the lineup. Right, Stott started the season out with a crazy hitting streak, and Brandon Marsh has just found a way. Outside of his early defensive mistakes in the field earlier in the year, he's really just been consistent at the plate this season, and you gotta love what you're getting. What you're getting from both of these guys, and they played well. And in today's game, Stott 3 for 5 with a run scored, only struck out once. It's Marsh at the bottom of the order, 2 for 4 with 2 RBIs. Bohm, the same thing, had 2 RBIs. When your bottom of the order is producing, you're going to be in great shape when your bottom of the order is producing. And both of you guys have produced, right? Stott, 291, 5 home runs, 19 RBIs. Marsh, 269, 4 home runs, 18 RBIs. And if you want to kind of project their numbers going forward, Bryson Stott is projected. This is just a projection. Projected to have 17 home runs and 63 RBIs, which I'm not going to say that's not horrible for a player. What, in his second full season?
Yes. Yeah.
In the majors,
full season at 25 years old, still developing. Yeah, not mad at that stats at all.
And then for Marsh, you're looking at what? At Marsh, they have him projected at 16, at 26 doubles, 13 triples, which would just be insane. But he can do it. He's already got 4, and they're looking at 13 home runs and 60 RBIs, which again would not be bad, for a player like Marsh, because I'm not looking for him to hit home runs, right? If I'm getting the 13 home runs and I'm getting 20 plus doubles and 10 or more triples, to me, that's like a home run for Brandon Marsh, because I know that means he's either getting on base or he's moving guys over while getting to second or getting to third.
Man, you mentioned it, getting that production from the bottom of the order, and like you said, I mean, driving those guys in. 13 triples and 13 home runs. That caught my ear. I don't know if that has that ever happened where a guy had equal as many or more triples.
That would be crazy.
Yeah, I mean, maybe some speedy guys. That sounds like a Ben Revere stat. That's the type of stat that Ben Revere would have had, like 15 triples, 2 home runs for old Ben Revere. But when you look at Marsh and when you look at Stott, man, and not just guys in the back of the order, 2 25-year-olds that are under team control for a long time. And just looking at the Phillies and how they're orchestrated overall and how they're built, there is some expensive contracts that are only going to get more expensive as these years keep going forward. And having 2 guys that are under team control, you can go to arbitration with them for, at least 2 or 3 more years. Both of those guys, I think is really big for the team building that the Phillies will have. Having guys who are affordable, if you can keep some of this production, if you can keep that high 200 batting average. I mean, Stott just fell below 300. You mentioned it, 291 right now. He's been above 300 most of the year. And Marsh as well spent a lot of time this year above 300, really plus stats. So getting that production out of young guys at the back of the order it's encouraging when you look forward to what the rest of this season is going to be. If they can keep that up and then Trey
Mm-hmm.
Turner gets his bat going, if Trey Turner returns to that 300 batting average range, hitting some home runs like he did today in the World Baseball Classic, how about Kyle Schwarber? Let's clean up
Yep.
the batting average a little bit. We
Yeah,
know what Kyle Schwarber
definitely.
is.
Yeah.
We know what he is. He's a guy who's going to hit a lot of home runs and be in the low 200s, but we need it to be in the low 200s. We can't deal with this, 150, 140
No,
batting average.
no, 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 no,
We
no.
got to have it in the 200s. We got to have some more consistency. That gives you the option to use him as a leadoff sometimes too. If he's a little more consistent at the plate, if you can expect at least one hit out of Schwarber if you need him at that leadoff spot. Not saying they necessarily do right now, but just gives you more flexibility and versatility overall. But we mentioned Stott and Marsh, an older guy who's really contributed this year and took a step forward from where he was is Nick Castellanos. Nick Castellanos
Yes,
came in a
yes,
big deal
yes.
last year. Obviously not the same caliber of deal as Trey Turner, but a similar type of situation, man. Came in with a lot of expectations. A guy whose swing in Cincinnati was so smooth, so pretty. I mean, so many home runs. This is a guy who was so productive with the Reds. So you're expecting some of that to come to Philly. Just didn't happen at first. There was some defensive miscues as well. Like it really didn't click for Castellanos early, outside of that home run opening day versus the A's last year in 2022, but really didn't click for Castellanos. This year it has. His bat has been so much more consistent. Has it been the Reds Nick Castellanos? No, it hasn't. But it's been a much more improved version from what we saw in Philly last year. So, you kind of put all that together. You try to keep Marsh and Stott having their productive season at 25 years old under team control. That's really, really big to me. In my opinion, I think it's really, really important for the Phillies.
It definitely is. And like you said, you mentioned Castellanos, right? Like you said, had a lot of hype, especially with the year that he had in Cincinnati where he made the All-Star team. Him and Jesse Winker, I think, both had rough first years where they were at. Obviously, Winker then got moved to the Brew Crew, but Castellanos, a lot was expected of him because it's like, yo, man, look at this guy's hitting 30 plus home runs in Cincy. The swing is compact, it's balanced. He's just going to be a guy that's just going to plug in right in. And obviously, it didn't happen last season. We even saw it in the playoffs where he was just swinging at any and everything. This season comes in. This season, the jersey's more well fitted. You know what I'm saying? It's not droopy. The jersey's well fitted. He's got the chain swagging. The shirt's unbuttoned up top. He's starting to feel himself like he's Cincinnati Castellanos. And when he hits the home runs, it looks like you said, we won't probably see Cincinnati Castellanos because I think that probably was like a blip in his career.
Yeah.
But when he hits home runs, you're like, that was Cincinnati Nick Castellanos. And the way that he's playing this season, you're looking at 289, 5 home runs, 26 RBIs, and a 792 OPS. There's nothing else that you can ask more from a guy like Castellanos, who for the large part of the early part of the season, he had to carry that lineup. And remember, when the season started, the top hitters were him and Alec Bohm for them first few weeks, trying to carry that offense because Trey Turner was struggling, Real Muto was struggling. They were trying to figure out first base, and then there was still no Bryce Harper.
Yeah, Castellanos has took on a much more important role. Probably what people thought he would take on last year, he's kind of been this year. And, to be in that, high 280s range, 289 compared to where he was last year, even if that evens out a little bit and it's in the 260s, 250s, you add a little bit more pop to that. I mean, there's a lot to be excited about. That's another guy they have under contract for a while. They're paying Nick Castellanos well. So to get production out of him, with that contract being what it is, definitely important. It pairs well with Marsh. It pairs well with Schwarber. I think Castellanos is a really nice bat in the middle of that lineup. You've got some more consistent guys like JT Real Muto to kind of help balance out some of what Schwarber and Castellanos bring you, because that's what people talked about when they signed both of those guys in the offseason before the 2021 season. Like, that's a lot of pop, but it's a lot of strikeouts. It's a lot of chasing pitches. It's a little bit of a defensive liability with both those guys. Neither one of those guys are superstars in the outfield. Like, it was an experiment by the Phillies, and when it worked last year, it really worked. The lineup, it had pop at every single spot, 1 through 9. But at times, man, there can be days where a starting pitcher is going to go out there and get 10 strikeouts, and the bullpen's going to lock things down, and the Phillies are going to lose 2-1 because they just couldn't get it going. And top to bottom, all those guys with a lot of pop just didn't have it. So Castellanos this year, definitely encouraging. A guy that I'm a big fan of. Like I mentioned, his swing, very, very smooth swing. Like it's fun to watch him connect with baseballs. He has a very, aesthetically pleasing swing. So would be great to see him continue on with this. And like I mentioned, even a little bit of a dip in that average, 289 might be high for Castellanos. Even a
Right.
little bit of dip, even that out with some power. That's an encouraging year.
Very encouraging, very encouraging. And you hope, like we said, and we're going to reiterate it, you hope, with Turner heating up, that he can carry it over into this road trip, because it's going to be a very interesting and tough road trip. And before we do that, and before we wrap up with the pod to talk about that, make sure again that you're tuned in, that you're subscribing to the podcast on all your platforms, that you subscribe to Harrison's YouTube page at Harrison Brown-Russo. Same thing, Substack, harrisonbrownrusso.substack.com, so you don't miss any of this content that we're giving, that we're delivering on a weekly basis. And let's talk about this 10-game road trip, Harrison, because this is not going to be easy. This is probably going to be one of the tougher stretches that they've had this season. It's a 10-game NL East stretch, which could, not going to say it's going to determine the season, but it's going to determine a lot of if you're going to be competing just straight up for the wild card, or if you'll give yourself a chance where you can say, hey, we might be able to stay in this division. If you're the Phillies, that we might be able to stay and play in this division. 10-game road trip, you're looking at 4 in Atlanta to start. 4 in Atlanta to start, with 2 national televised games Saturday and Sunday on FS1 and ESPN2. They get the Sunday night treatment. Then they have a 3-game set. They have a day off on that Monday for Memorial Day. And then they have a 3-game set in New York. First time for them against the Mets. I think first time this season against the Mets.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
And in New York should be a good one there. Three there with nationally televised game on TBS on that Tuesday. Then they wrap up their NL East swing with 3 at Washington, which is not really a cakewalk because the Nationals have shown they're a little frisky too, a little bit this season. But the series starts Thursday night with the one and only Aaron Nola, who haven't been great this season. He's been okay. He's pitched well as of late, but still trying to get over the rough start to kind of put him in this hole where he's 4-3 with a 4.31 ERA, and it's not encouraging that he's also giving up 6 home runs, giving up a home run in 6 straight starts. Not very encouraging. However, and it also isn't encouraging either, they have a 4.62 ERA on the road, but he's holding opponents to a 230 batting average, which is pretty good. But that being said, the Phillies, and you probably would agree with this, Harrison, they need a good start from Aaron Nola on Thursday night, because this is a tone setter here. Just because you're looking at the rest of that series, you got Taijuan Walker on Thursday going against Jared Schuster, who's coming off a very good outing against the Mariners earlier. I want to say earlier this week or over the weekend. And then on Saturday, Saturday you have Wheeler versus Charlie Morton. And then Sunday, don't know who's going to pitch on Sunday, but you get Spencer Strider on Sunday night. So don't know who the Braves are going to be pitching on Thursday. But that being said, need Aaron Nola to come out strong, a quality start, the bats get going, whoever the Braves start, because this is going to be a very tough 4-game set where you would like to win 3 out of 4, but a split wouldn't be horrible either.
It could be Drew Elder that they start. I don't know how they've thrown the past few days. Drew Elder, a newcomer for them, a 5th-round pick in 2020, could be an all-star this year. Obviously, Strider, Fried, and Morton are the big-name guys. Drew Elder has quietly put together a really strong season, really low ERA, won all of his games, hasn't taken any losses yet. So that's an encouraging one. For the Phillies, you look at Aaron Nola, talking about him in particular, kind of reminds me of the lineup a lot in a funny way. Aaron Nola is a guy who's going to strike a lot of guys out, throw a lot of great pitches, but then he's going to leave some really bangable pitches right in the middle of the zone. You mentioned it, 6 consecutive games with a home run. It obviously isn't a pretty stat. It's not the most surprising stat. Like, if you really watch him pitch, it's some great pitches. There's great velocity, but there's just a lot of breaking balls that hang, even if they don't all go out, even if guys might miss them, take them. He leaves opportunities for hitters to take advantage of him. I mean, it's something that he's done throughout his career. It's kind of some of the reasons why later in starts sometimes he can get caught up, not even through any fault of his own. He might not be fatigued. He might not be having a bad outing, just one or two pitches really get away from him, a guy or two's on base, the start looks a lot different than it played out. So that could be some of the reasons you see that higher 4 ERA right now for Aaron Nola. Hasn't been the best season, a lot of time left, a lot of time for him to kind of work into the season, build into the season. But yeah, in a way, kind of reminds me of that lineup. It's boom or bust. It's either, great pitch, great outing, Aaron Nola was really on, or man, there was a lot of stuff that was hung up in that zone, hung out there for the Braves to go get this week. So it's an important series. You look at it, the Phillies are 6.5 back right now. The NL East outside of Washington, it's really all clogged together. I mean, the Mets are 4.5 behind the Braves. The Marlins are 5.5 behind the Braves. So the Braves obviously have a nice, decent cushion, but we're talking about 4 games with the Phillies right now. If they go steal 3, this looks a lot different, early next week than it does right now. And then the Mets as well, if they can go out and outperform the Mets, first time they're playing them this year, this Mets team really has kind of hit their stride recently. It's been a little bit of a rocky start, but recently, real scrappy, been winning games late, winning games with walk-offs. Played the Rays really tough, wound up taking 2 against the Rays last week, I believe. Had hit a walk-off. Pete Alonso had a walk-off. So the Mets, another one, kind of like the Phillies, really solid on paper. You look at the Mets lineup and their pitching rotation. Obviously, they lost to Grom. You go out and add Justin Verlander to replace him. Another team kind of similar to the Phillies, really solid on paper, just hasn't all clicked yet. I'm looking forward to seeing them match up head to head. I think that's going to be something that we could see later in this year as well.
Yeah. I completely agree with you, man. I think everything you said spot on about this team, especially in this East Coast trip, is going to be so huge for them. It's going to be a tone setter because if you look at where they're at right now in the division, they are, I want to say, I just had it up. They are currently, as we're recording, they're 6.5 games out of first place, right? So hypothetically, let's just say if the Phillies were to sweep the Braves, right? That ain't happening, but hypothetically. Now you're only 2.5 games back of first place. And you've likely leapfrogged the Mets and the Marlins, and then you're in second place.
And
even if you
haven't leapfrogged the Mets, you get a chance to play them right away. I was just going to jump in real quick and say that. You got them right coming up. So it's a big trip. Yeah.
Exactly. And then even if you take 3 out of 4, then you're probably 3. Well, if you take 3 out of 4, let's say if you lose the first game, you'll be 7.5 back, but then you pick up the last 3, then you're only 4.5 back. So again, not a bad spot. The worst spot is you go 1-3,
right,
and you're now 9.5 back, and then you got to play the Mets, who have already picked up their lead against you, and you're not too far from the Mets if you're the Phillies. That's why you have to just hold it down against Atlanta. Like, at least go 3-1, 2-2 at the most, because you're only 2 games out of the loss column behind the Mets. So there could be an opportunity for you if you play good in that Mets series. And right now we don't know who's obviously going to pitch in that series. Well, we do have like projected starters, and you're looking in that series, you're looking at Suarez versus Kodai Senga, who's been really good for the Mets. Could be a rookie of the year candidate for them. Nola versus Carrasco. You would think that Nola would have the advantage over Carrasco. And then Thursday afternoon showdown between Taijuan Walker, the former Met, against Max Scherzer. So Scherzer has been hit around too, along with Verlander. So there could be another chance for a win, but you gotta do your best job in this 4-game set, which means Nola has to pitch well. If Nola pitches well and you win, then that's great. That you could possibly afford to lose the matchup against with Walker on the mound, because you know you got Wheeler coming back up. You just got to do everything you can in your power, because you don't know what you're going to do on Sunday. You know, it could be a bullpen game. We just saw that on Tuesday night where they went bullpen and they held it down for the most part. Just the offense couldn't get going. So we'll see how the rest of it plays out. This East Coast trip is going to, I mean, it technically is East Coast, but his NL East trip will be a good one to follow. You know, they're going to see a lot of good pitchers. You don't, like I said, don't know we're going to see Thursday, but you're talking about Schuster, Morton, Strider, Senga, Carrasco, Scherzer, Gray, Mackenzie Gore. You're going to see a lot of arms, and this offense is going to be tested. But if they can do the little things, not get down behind early, like they did earlier today, against the Diamondbacks. I think they'll be okay. I think they'll be okay. If they go 6-4, if they go 6-4 in this, I think they'll be good, which that will require, I don't know what they will require, but 6-4, I think you'll at least win. If you go 6-4, you should win at least one out of the three series at least.
I think it's going to require them hitting good pitching, which is what this season is going to require for them because those
Yes.
names you just mentioned, I mean, outside of injury, they're not going anywhere. The
Mm-mm.
Braves have a good pitching rotation. Well, 1 through 5. There's not a bad starter, really. The Mets have a good pitching rotations. All those names you mentioned, I mean, even Carrasco, that's a vet who's been around, a proven guy, not easy to hit. Senga is having a great year, really transitioning well to the MLB. Verlander and Scherzer, 2 future Hall of Famers, obviously have been hit around a little bit, but there's not really a break. Miami has guys, Sandy Alcantara, Sixto Sanchez, like Washington has guys, Mackenzie Gore, Josiah Gray. Like the NL East has good pitching. They're gonna have to hit good pitching to win these games. It's something they've
Mm-hmm.
struggled with at times. Sometimes they step up, sometimes they don't step up. This series in particular, going to be really important. You got to go out and hit good pitching. I think that's going to be the key.
Yeah, you gotta hit good pitching, because if you're able to hold down and at least stay above 500 on this road in these
Mm-hmm.
10 games, you're going to return home to face the Tigers team, who they've shown some flashes. They've been a little frisky in the Central, but it's not to say that you can't sweep that series before the Dodgers come to town. So there's going to be opportunities for them, and obviously you would like to finish out this month strong, because it
Right.
didn't it had started out a little rough, and you hope to finish it out strong. So we'll see what happens. Phillies back in action tomorrow night, Thursday. Nola on the mound. We don't know who's pitching yet. For the Braves, 4 game set in Atlanta, 3 in New York, 3 in DC. Then they return home June 5th to start a 6 game homestand with the Detroit Tigers coming to town. And that's pretty much going to wrap up this podcast. Really appreciate, again, everyone tuning in and checking out this episode again. Make sure you are following us on Twitter at Total Sports Live, checking out totalsportslive.com. Also, download and listen to this podcast and all the podcasts that we've done on multiple platforms: Google, Spotify, Apple, iHeart, wherever you get your podcast from. They're all there. Just search Total Sports Live TSL Podcast. Again, really appreciate everybody that takes the time out of their day just to even listen for 5 minutes. Really appreciate everybody doing that. Again, if you do miss this podcast on audio, you can check it out on Harrison's YouTube page, Harrison Brown-Russo on YouTube. Just go over there, search it on YouTube, hit that subscribe button as well while you're over there. Don't waste time. And then also make sure you subscribe to his Substack as well, harrisonbrownrusso.substack.com. Anything we should be looking out for on the newsletter front, Harrison, or is the shop closed for the week?
Shop is never closed. We're always open. Content is 24/7, 365. If anybody knows that, I think it's you, my friend, with all the great
Yes.
work you do. I think I might have learned that from you, if anything. So the shop is never closed. We got Substack. Gotta give some love to my YouTube community, man. I feel like I haven't been posting videos enough. I'm a little bit out the loop. I've been writing. I guess it's something about this time of year. I'm in my writer mode, but definitely some stuff coming out on the Substack. I think I'm gonna put some Philly stuff out to coincide with this podcast. Actually, a little bit of written. You want a little bit more. You want to see these stats on paper. Put some of that on there, and just covering baseball as a whole. And then we're in the middle of arena football season. Arena football is how me and you really coincided and really started working together and started doing our thing together throughout all these years. The High Motion Podcast. So got to show some love to our roots, man. The AFL is not back yet. We don't have a team in the area, but plenty of people watching arena football. So, that's what I got going on my end, man. Appreciate you as always, Jovan. Really fun pod. Great coming on here and talking with you guys. Make sure everybody's checking out all the work you do, all the work our guys Nick and Seth do,
Yep.
all the work all of our guys do, man. Anybody in this sports media landscape, man, definitely showing love to all those guys. But definitely appreciate you having me on, Joe.
Yeah, no problem. Any and all times. So we back next week. Don't know what we're going to talk about. Maybe the Sixers will make a head coaching hire. Maybe we'll talk about that. Or maybe we'll talk about NBA draft. It is almost getting around the time we're talking about NBA draft. I might have to go hit up my Rolodex and see who I can get on to come join us on the pod to talk some Wemby and, some G League elite camp. I might got to hit up some people to see who want to come on the pod. So, hey, we'll try to figure that all out for
We
next week.
might need a WNBA podcast going here, Jovan. I
Yes.
think, with the coverage you've been putting out recently, especially on Sporting News and just your history of coverage for the WNBA, I think it might be that time to really start to look into that, how we get one of those going.
Hey, I'm always down to talk about the.
We got to talk. We'll talk off camera.
Yeah, I'm always down to talk about
All
the
right.
W. So hey, we'll talk about all that again. You hear all this good stuff again. Make sure you subscribe to the podcast and you tuned in, because you'll just never know what we'll talk about next year on the Total Sports Live podcast. Hence the name Total Sports Live. So for me and Harrison, everyone have a good one, and we will talk to you all very soon.